Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sufan, lead for Health Data and AI at APAC. Thank you for joining the call. As more people start to trickle in, I would like to start today's session proper. So a very warm welcome to the APAC webinar, looking ahead to 2025, translating AI in MedTech to action. So before we begin today's session, just a few admin information. We will be recording the webinar, and the recording as well as the materials will be made available on our website after the event. So you can refer to them or you can share them with your team and your colleagues if they want to have a look at what was discussed today. So for Q&A, we have set aside around 10 minutes for Q&A after the panel discussion. So if you do have questions for any of the speakers, please share it via the Zoom Q&A function, and we will pick up the questions from there. So why are we talking about this topic? We do recognize that integrating AI is becoming a crucial strategic priority for the MedTech industry in APAC. And due to that, the APAC Med AI Working Group, which I lead, alongside with our members and knowledge partner KPMG, embarked on the study to identify levers where industry, alongside government and other stakeholders in this ecosystem, can address challenges and opportunities in areas including regulations, ethics, funding pertaining to AI and MedTech here. So I'm very pleased to have 4 speakers with us today who will share their perspective on what lies ahead for MedTech in our region, and they all come from different angles from their own areas of expertise. So now I want to invite our first speaker, Ms. Anastasia Myros, Director, Healthcare and Life Sciences APAC at KPMG, to give an overview of the key findings in these areas, and then she'll follow with a panel discussion by the rest of our panelists. So Anna, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sufan, and delighted to be with you all here today on a very hot topic that's front of mind. Before we hand over to what's the exciting part of this webinar, which is the panel discussion, just wanted to help set the scene for the next 5 minutes in terms of leading into the discussion and where we are in terms of AI and MedTech adoption. So my slides are just coming up. Perfect. So I'll try not to do death by slideware because that's not really why we're here today. So just to reset the scene in terms of some of the work that a lot of you on this webinar may have been involved in, and definitely some of our panelists today, was the recent white paper that we co-developed with APAC Med and the contributions of the APAC Med members in terms of what's required and what are the levers to realize the value of AI and MedTech. So for that paper, I think it was really clear in terms of what are some of the pressing needs specific in Asia Pacific, because this paper was really about focusing on the needs in Asia Pacific and where AI can help address some of those needs, such as financial sustainability. So we know there's rising medical costs. We know with the introduction of innovation, sometimes that's more costly before it becomes cheaper. So how do we ensure financial access and financial support to improve healthcare innovation? We also know there's increasing ESG expectations in the region, particularly in terms of not just environmental implications, but social disparities. You know, how can we address disparities across Asia Pacific in terms of access to digital, geographical access, demographic, and social cultural access? And then, you know, we've got changing needs in terms of healthcare professionals and across countries as well in terms of digital capability, digital appetite, as well as expectations in terms of talent and attitudes towards AI. And that's reflected the same in terms of a lot of the patients that some of you who have B2C models are experiencing as well in terms of the consumerization of healthcare. And then with AI as well, there are unique challenges that starts to present in terms of there's increased competition or collaboration in the ecosystem. As you know, there are now a lot of tech players playing in this space and entering into healthcare where there wasn't presence previously. So what this looks at is then, okay, with these competing driving forces that we're all acutely aware of in Asia Pacific, there is a potential for AI to start to address some of these disparities, some of these healthcare rising costs, workforce shortages, innovation and healthcare outcomes. So really looking at specifically in region, what are some of those opportunities for AI? But the key thing about the paper wasn't just looking at the value of AI, because I think particularly those in MedTech and the healthcare ecosystem acknowledge that. I don't think the promise is what's being questioned. The biggest barrier is really the translation of that value. I think the value is, acknowledged, although there are, obviously considerations in trust and security, but the general value is acknowledged. It's more about how do we support that translation. And part of this is really stemming from the new era that we're moving into. So, we spent the last decade really, or not the last decade, the last few years talking about digital health. It's all been about digital health, but now that's just business as usual. It's expected that healthcare is digitalized. We're now moving into intelligent healthcare. So this is rather than passive IT, passive analytics, it's more looking at intelligent healthcare. So using things like precision medicine, digital therapeutics, real-time analytics for forecasting and insight. So we're really moving towards this next era this year and beyond. I'll skip over this slide because I think the biggest thing that, we're here to talk about today, and that's really what the panel will get into, is how do we address this gap? We know the promise and acknowledge the promise of AI, but how do we actually realize the value in terms of those operational efficiencies, better care, better clinical outcomes, improved innovation in region? How do we start to see this value in the region and ensure it's being translated? And from our consultations, not just in the MedTech industry, but across healthcare, both globally and regionally, there were kind of 3 key levers identified to support value realization, which was access, capability, and trust, which we'll talk more about today, or what we call the action framework. Specifically, to put it simply, access is, can I get the AI in MedTech? Capability is then, if I can get it, can I utilize it to realize the outcomes, whether clinical, operational? And then if I can get it and I can utilize it, am I confident in those outcomes? So do I trust those outcomes? Do I believe those outcomes? Am I comfortable to utilize it if I can receive the AI? I'll go less through these, but I did just want to touch on behind each of these. This isn't just a framework. There were key barriers and therefore considerations identified behind each of these, namely in a 3x3 framework. So if we look at access, we talk a lot about considerations for financial access, both reimbursement, but as well as financial access for the delivery of this innovation and the deployment. So who pays not just for the reimbursed innovation or the utilization of the innovation, but actually delivering and integrating that into the healthcare ecosystem? And then how do we ensure when it is delivered, it is reducing disparities and not increasing disparities, such as in other countries where digital access may be reduced, capability may be reduced, or ensuring it doesn't sit behind a paywall impeded for only the haves and have-nots. Similarly, for capability, really this came down to 3 key areas in terms of talent and skills. That's across the value chain. So that's not just within the MedTech ecosystem, but as well for the users of the AI. So our healthcare professionals, and both current talent, but as well as future talent. How do we foster that next generation of talent? The next capability is really the system capability. So how do we ensure the health system has data interoperability and integration to ensure that the AI and MedTech can be integrated into the health system? And then to support this, we really need collaboration and partnership, because AI and MedTech does not sit in isolation. To be integrated, it's not just within the system, but there are other players in the ecosystem to ensure it's successful. And then finally, when we talk about trust, this is all about, and we already saw some questions come through on this topic, in terms of how do we ensure the outcomes? So how do we protect patient data? How do we ensure with regulation we find that right balance of protection and enablement, and also avoid divergence of regulation across the healthcare ecosystem or across the region to ensure that it is supporting trust in outcomes, but not creating over governance, particularly with disparities across the region for regulation. And of course, ethics is an important consideration as well. And we know the APAC Med Committee has done a lot of work in this space in terms of, drafting initially what that code of ethics looks like for MedTech to ensure we're all operating from the same level playing field on what's acceptable to us as an industry and what's not acceptable for AI in MedTech. And so with that, I'd like to just finish with, please, if you'd like to learn more, it is quite a robust report. I mean, it is over 80 pages. So I've just touched on a couple of items, but behind each of these, there are recommendations and actions from leading experts within the area in terms of how to take some of this forward so we can start to realize the value of AI in MedTech. So please scan the QR code or reach out afterwards. It is published on the APAC Med and the KPMG website for ease of access. So with that, I would love to get into the discussion where we've got our fantastic panelists today. And really, like Sufen said, today is all about, we're at the end of 2024. We spent this year looking at what's going on in Asia Pacific, what's some of the actions we need to take to realize the value of AI in MedTech. But now we're confronted with 2025. We know some of the actions. So what are we going to do to take these forward? What's tangible and pragmatic in 2025 to start to make that step change to realizing the value? And to support some of the discussion today, I've got my esteemed panelists and experts joining on the line. So please give a wave as I announce each of you accordingly. So we have Dr. S.S. Lee, who is Senior Healthcare Economics and Government Affairs Director from Medtronic. Give us a wave, SS. Perfect. We have Shweta, who is Director of Global Digital and R&D Policy, J&J. Shweta. Thank you. And we have Nitin, Senior Legal Counsel from Becton Dickinson and Company. Lovely to have you, Nitin. Give us a wave. Perfect. Now I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see our panelists in full blow. Please, as we go through this session, this is meant to be interactive. We would love to hear from you if you've got key questions on what can we do in 2025 as a MedTech industry or across the ecosystem to realize the value of MedTech. So please use the Q&A function, like Sufen mentioned, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll be moderating to ensure we ask some of these as they come through. Without further ado, maybe to get us started, I would love to open up to the panelists in terms of the first question on, we've heard a lot of the numerous actions, there was a lot in the report in terms of what we could do, but I'd love to hear from each of you as we look into 2025. What do you see as the critical next steps that the MedTech industry can take to really support the translation of AI and MedTech in the region here with us today? Maybe starting with you, SS, what do you see as, the one or two critical next steps that those on the line could take forward?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So I think the last few years, there are a lot of this expectation, sometimes hype about AI embedded technologies, the value and potential, particularly about the efficiency and productivity, and also more better care to the patients. So right now, there are a lot of discussion. What's the value about the AI embedded technology? So I think I thought about the items, some element we have to be thinking about in the future and also right now, even though. Number one is that the agreement about the value among the multiple stakeholders. For that, we need create a value framework and before our AI technology. Eventually the technology have to be adopted by the healthcare provider or the payer, and also multiple stakeholders. Upon there's some recognition of the value, but compared to the traditional MedTech, the characteristic AI is broader. So this application and the broader the opportunity for the better care, but there's the gap about the value and evidence. For that, I think that we need some consensus about the value frame of development for the more unify the acceptance of AI technologies. So when I look at the US cases, so even though there are a lot of discussion about AI value, technology value, but due to the lack of the reimbursed funding principle, like some benefit category, lack of the benefit category and lack of the value framework, the industry has, the manufacturer and the developer has been strong with us in the entering the market under the reimbursement scheme. That's one example. So I think that is the cases in other countries too, even including Korea, where I'm based in. So we need the consensus for the value framework, how we define the value about technology itself. That's one. The other one is that the evidence generations. Let me share about Korea cases. Compared to some previous some support levels in Korea, I think the Korean government has been very supportive about the introduction of the AI technologies. For that, they allow the conditional reimbursement coverage or the conditional the patient the out-of-pocket scheme, which is very rare case in the past. But eventually, we need to generate the evidence, particularly clinical evidence, and plus the economic evidence to demonstrate the value for money driven by the AI technology. Without that, after some conditional period, so the can maybe disappear due to our failure in the demonstration of the value for that. So when I look at the data from the US, even the US FDA approved AI technology with a 510K or de novo. Up to now, when I look at the statistics data, more than 1,000 technology already approved. But most of the cases, the evidence driven by the retrospective or the single arm, or there's a very lacking about the prospective and randomized control trial, which is kind of the gold standard for the healthcare sector. And also that's why there are some level of the suspicion about the real value about the AI technology. To satisfy and meet some unmet needs for the evidence, definitely the industry and manufacturer and developer have to pay attention about how we can generate more the clear value message through the evidence generation. That's my thought. Thank you.
No, thank you, SS. And I think that nicely touches on really the access considerations and two clear, tangible next steps to really be clear as an industry in terms of, what is that value framework and what is the evidence that can be generated to really support that, to ensure there is uptake as well as, reimbursement for these solutions and for the relevant use cases as well. Maybe, building upon that, I'd love to open up to maybe yourself, Shweta. I know, yourself and J&J have been doing a lot of work in terms of the capability aspect of enabling AI and MedTech. So perhaps you can share with us, one or two critical next steps that you'd recommend coming into 2025 to support translation.
So first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, I would like to answer that more. One aspect is, of course, what are the capabilities as MedTech industry that we can contribute to from a health systems perspective, and what we can do internally as an industry, as a company, as part of that health systems, right? So I think no doubt that human expertise is crucial for both AI development as well as AI adoption. So on the development side, if you look at our ecosystem, we have, you need very skilled researchers, engineers, data scientists who are really essentially designing, building, and managing these AI sort of systems for us. On the adoption side, you need a skilled AI healthcare workforce, which would be eventually implementing these solutions to drive the innovation and efficiency or outcomes that we are envisaging AI will bring, right? So I think let's start from the adoption side. As MedTech industry, we will need to collaborate, to kind of upskill these sort of, through continuous education programs, upskill the existing healthcare workforce. Perhaps working with in-country medical associations to co-create and co-design these initiatives would be the most pragmatic approach. And while we do that for our workforce that's already there in the ecosystem, I think it's also important to incorporate AI into the medical school curriculum, so that the upcoming healthcare workforce is future ready, has the capability and also the trust in AI solutions. But beyond that, I think what is also required is to kind of forge a very positive outlook towards AI in general and data-driven culture in particular. And for all these, people who are either on the developing side or the adoption side, to have basic sort of understanding of the ethical and privacy considerations when it comes to AI, because I think that's going to be a very big sort of a roadblock. I mean, if we can implement AI at scale, but we don't get the ethics right, we don't get the privacy considerations right, that's a big concern. Now, from a delivery side, no doubt we need to develop some joint educational programs with universities, research institutions to create a skilled AI sort of, innovators, we can say. And these innovators and AI developers, apart from, of course, hardcore skilling related to their subject matter or, advanced technical skills, what we also require is for them to have a thorough understanding of the healthcare landscape, as well as just a basic understanding of what are the evolving standards, because things are really changing so fast. So some sort of nuance on how to be really compliant with the evolving standards will also be very important for these sort of innovators. Now, let us come to the medtech industry. Now, it's really fascinating to see how AI is being integrated across the medtech value chain, right from clinical, regulatory functions to manufacturing and supply chain to marketing and sales. So, I mean, no doubt we need to kind of invest in our workforce. But before that, I think something that's also so important from a capability perspective is for us as organizations and as industry to recognize data is a very strategic asset and just recognize the power and potential of health data. So what I believe, what will really distinguish some organizations that will eventually do very well from others is having a solid data strategy, with which basically what we mean is having clear objectives of what you wish to do with your data. Also making sure that your employees understand security and privacy considerations, because a solid data strategy is a foundation for all the AI initiatives that you're taking within the organization, right? And we have use cases that are emerging across the value chain. So for that to happen, what we then require is what we are calling nowadays is a bilingual workforce, which basically means that, employees are not just experts in their respective fields, but they are also adept at leveraging technology. They kind of understand healthcare ecosystem, irrespective. It could be a data scientist, could be a marketing person, could be a legal expert, but they have basic understanding of technology and as well as their expertise. So I think that's something, Anna, I believe is a good next step. And I'm happy to share some examples very specific to J&J. In J&J, we've developed a very robust sort of a global AI-powered learning and development platform. It's called J&J Learn. And this platform is essentially what it's doing is it's providing digital curriculums for employees. So it's kind of, it's a mix of on-demand and live learning platform. And employees, and it has identified some really good 40 plus competencies that you would require to be future ready. And it allows people to grow their skills from really basic, elementary to sort of expert capabilities. So, and it's covering topics such as data sciences, intelligent automation, and Gen AI, not just for the tech workers, but for all employees in general. So I'll stop there. But I think as MedTech industry, we need a lot of collaboration. There's a lot that we can bring to the table in terms of the healthcare ecosystem. There's a lot that we need to do internally as well as an industry to collaborate with our partners.
No, thank you, Shweta. That was a very robust answer. And I think it's quite clear and quite tangible in terms of, what we could do in 2025, both, internally in the industry. I love the notion of a bilingual workforce. And it sounds like the same almost applies externally as well. How do we ensure that future and existing healthcare workforce as well is adept, not just in the AI technical skills, but, the evolving regulations as well and evolving standards. So it sounds like both internally and externally, we need a workforce of bilinguals. With that, I'd love to move, because I know Nitin, we haven't given you a chance to talk, and I know you're quite angled in the trust angle with your role in legal. So would love to hear from you. We've touched on how do we support access with value framework and evidence generation next year. We've spoken about the capability, both internal and external. How do we develop that kind of bilingual workforce? What about on the trust angle? How do we really ensure next year we support trust in adoption around security, compliance, and privacy? What are your thoughts there?
Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity as well, and completely agree with SS and Shweta as well. I think they sort of made my job slightly easier by touching on some really good topics already that I would have covered as well. So I think from AI being the buzzword to now it's settling down, but still causing new set of confusions. I think the easiest answer is trust is pivotal in what we do. Okay. Assuming, because we are in healthcare, right? Assuming there was no technology, we would have still have delivered the same level of trust in our services or in our products or our offerings the way we are doing now, right? So nothing changes because technology is only changing the mode of delivery of the healthcare, but the core of healthcare still remains, right? So that's number one. I think one thing which is very important for a medical device company, most of us on the group today, is be very clear, what does trust mean? Okay, trust is a very wide term, very difficult to define. It could change from a healthcare setting. It could change in terms of what the product are we looking at, who's the end consumer of that product, how is the because we as companies can only manage what we sell, right, or what we deploy for a customer, right? How much of that is really getting valued at that level, at the customer level? Also, there are multiple layers of trust, right? So and again, it's a very broad concept. So the way I think I can probably address it in next 3 to 4 minutes is the simpler ones to address and focus on is, and again, as a company, I can tell you, at BD we are very buoyant on connected healthcare. That's the reality of how we see the next years to come. Our commitment, whether it is in terms of developing products or acquiring products, is very significantly high there at this point of time. So therefore, our parameters of assessing products that we are either buying or developing or deploying already has inbuilt a lot of trust factor in whatever we do. The easier elements are, how do you build trust, right? Are you offering what you really have, or are you offering something which you don't have? Number one, that's the easiest way to build trust. Number two, are you also in a situation where you've actually avoided a black box problem? Because I think that's one of the big questions and concerns that most of the people have, that, hey, look, don't get us into a black box, because we do not want to work with a customer or offer a product which ends up being in a black box. We don't want to do that, right? I think safety, security, very important now. Whether you call it a data privacy, whether you call it healthcare sort of confidentiality or sensitive data, there are multiple parameters, and I can tell you, for the companies that we are part of, in APAC Med and some of the other groups, I think most of this is inbuilt in who we are as of today. I don't think we'll be doing a catching up in terms of getting this. So we are established companies, and I think it becomes very important for us to go out there and start developing trust, right? And I always say this: trust always has two actors, right? One is a company like us, and the other is the person who's using the product. And the understanding of the healthcare institution, KOL, whatever setting you may look at, is really, really pivotal in understanding whether it is a trust issue or whether it is a product development issue or whether it is an issue of, technology becoming better and performing something which probably it will do much better 2 years later as compared to what it is right now. So I think those are slightly complicated, multi-layered sort of aspects, which it's very, very difficult to weave through one common sort of a thread. But yes, the good news is that as long as trust becomes the backbone of what we are offering to begin with, I think that's half of the problem solved. The rest, your product choice, rest how you understand how the operating systems of the institutions, healthcare institutions work, end up solving a lot of problem as well. So that's one. I think there's a lot which gets discussed about um, you know um, biasness, and I think that's where the modelings come in picture. And I can tell you the way the US regulator, the way the European regulator, and some of the other developing countries in developed country regulators also have started looking at AI related products for registration. They are looking into all this already. So they're not going to give you registrations if they find that, hey, look, 1 plus 1 is it turning out to be 11 rather than 2 or rather than 3 for that matter, right? So there is a lot of checks and balance that we have to start trusting. But yes, for someone who's new, there's always is the peak of adoption isn't there, so therefore the trust starts getting built in when you go to the peak. And the peak is when people start blindly trusting. And as I said in the beginning, um, the one challenge that trust will always face is healthcare as a sector starts from consumable to a diagnostic to a high end equipment, right? And to bring one commonality of trust to say, hey, look, this is the golden standard which runs across all, may be slightly difficult because the user setting, the end use, and the multiple other factors will always vary, Anna. So I think that's where probably I'll kind of summarize what my thoughts are on this one.
No, thank you, Nitin. And it is a big topic, as you're alluding to, and something we could probably do a whole webinar on, and maybe that's a thought for later. But I love what you talk about in terms of making sure trust is built into the design. How are you making sure those security considerations, those safety considerations are built in, and avoiding the black box, making sure there's at least a minimum level of transparency and auditability of the AI that you are developing. And then I also love what you touched on in terms of, at the moment we're in that curve where we're kind of fearful of AI, but how do we make sure, we don't end up on the counterbalance where we're fearless, and we just trust blindly. So, it's finding that, how do we make sure we're not fearful or fearless, but we effectively fear less within AI. So I do love that anecdote there. Maybe I know we've had good conversation so far on, for 2025, what would it need for access, capability, and trust? Please type your questions into the Q&A for our panelists. I do see we've got a first question from Karen, specifically looking at, we are well aware of some of the challenges for medical device accessing data to really optimize AI algorithms. What are some of the thoughts from the panelists in terms of how to potentially partner with healthcare providers or access some of these data sources, whether for design and delivery? Any case examples or reflections on what you guys have seen work well?
Well, I can talk about it. So Anna, though we have seen a lot of health data partnerships, essentially, I mean, if we talk about J&J from a pharmaceutical side, there are less examples, definitely in terms of large strategic public-private partnership, which are on health data from a MedTech industry perspective. But that does not mean that it doesn't exist. I think what we really require, in fact, within the context of AI also, it's extremely important. We need policymakers to support these strategic public-private partnerships, because I think if we really want to invest in research and development and have a strong AI ecosystem, access to comprehensive as well as diverse data sets is what we are also talking. We're also talking about, how we're also talking about the element of bias, for example, in AI. So AI models will only generate, I mean, what they are fed in, right? So I think there's a huge issue of not just access to data, quality data, but also representative data which is representative of the population. I think that's a huge issue. And it's also extremely important for training your AI algorithms effectively. So I think that's one area we absolutely need to improve and expand, and we need government support in terms of having the access to, large scale sort of government data sets and computing powers. So I think that's one area we definitely need a lot of sort of, collaboration with a lot of public sector players. But there are there are some examples, like in Europe, we do have the Odyssey network, in which Johnson & Johnson is involved, where we do get access to really good quality data. There are issues on, of course, quality data, and then there is a very big issue, which is once you have these huge real world data sets, you also need to bring them into a common format. So data standardization becomes a challenge as well. So we do have health data partnerships. We have many examples in Europe, but in Asia Pacific, we have very limited, and more so, I think, in the MedTech side, we definitely need more partnerships.
No, thank you, Shweta. And I think that's a great summary in terms of, the value of PPP partnerships. And, it's not just access to quality data, but representative, data, particularly when we're talking about, Asia Pacific. And beyond that, not just accessing quality data and representative data, but then ensuring it can be utilized as well. So I think that's, a great overview there. Before we move on to the next question, Nitin, SS, anything to add there, reflections in terms of how your companies or what you may have seen in terms of accessing usable health data?
Yes, I think plenty of examples that we are looking at right now. I think we are a couple. Actually, let me explain this slightly differently. To begin with, what Shweta said, right? Just to go back to the last question, I've always believed, and I've said this in multiple occasions, that the biggest aggregator of any sort of a data today is the government. Okay, be it health, be it finance, be it economics, be it whatever data you need, right? So the intent of government leveraging in on their own data power is directly dependent on how well do they see data and its power sitting in their own decision making for the years to come. And I think that's a big sort of a gap that in 25 we should be aiming to work on. Okay, the governments needs to be informed that, look, there is a benefit at the end of the day for the government as well. That's number one. Coming back to our company, as I said, whenever we have, whether it's a new asset that we've bought, which is to do with sort of a AI driven sort of a product that we've acquired, or we've implemented our own products, we've been very clear to be extremely transparent, to say this is what we can do and this is what it can't be achieved right now. Be very clear of what our capabilities are and what our limitations are. I think that's the easiest way to win anyone's trust, because then you're not sort of overselling or undercommitting, right? I think, and as I go back to what I started saying, the concept still remains similar. I mean, if someone were to trust me, what are the 2, 3, 4 factors that they would trust me on? Is exactly how mostly it'll work with in a med device setup as well. The principles are same. The format may change a little bit. That's externally, right? Internally, Anna, what we've started doing, and I've been a part of such committees as well. We've actually formulated internal committees which have started looking into each and every request of a new AI product that comes into the company. So when I say that there is one which is from a sort of inorganic growth perspective, we don't look at that. But for example, there is a business which wants to leverage a third party sort of AI startup. They want to work with us and integrate their sort of a platform into what we offer, because we are a slightly more complicated company than most of us, because we start from a consumable and go all the way up to sort of a very, very critical sort of a care product as well. So we started looking into all those requests from 3 or 4 angles. One, is this really needed? Number two, does this help or does this jeopardize our existing IT system framework? Does this end up probably breaching some of the parameters like we spoke about, confidentiality, data privacy, and so on and so forth? What we've seen is companies from the European regions are way strong as far as the GDPR and the data privacy aspects are concerned. Some of the other sort of companies that we work with, they do form different layers of sort of compliances. So we started looking at all those things very, very carefully. I don't, it's, COVID did result in probably everyone coming up with some technology sort of an output to say, look, I need this, I need this. But that's the past, that's the history of past, because we've also seen that the underlying AI development at the parent company level has been really fast. So we can't be very, very different from where we are moving at the headquarter level as well, right? We have to make sure that we are talking to the same sort of logic. I think, and one thing which has worked very well for us is culturally, we've been very strong to say, look, this may not be ready yet, and we are very happy to probably not go on with that right now and say, look, we'll be spending more time, energy on this one to get you what you guys need. And I think those are the areas which have worked really well for us. And look, the reality is, there are areas like known, there are unknown knowns, right? How do you address those? You can't address right now. You'll only have to live those to be able to see how do they work, what is not working, how do you really solve for it. And as I said, there are lots of other unsaid aspects of trust as well, right? Whether it's job loss, social inequality, environmental impact, and so on and so forth. All those are conversations which are dialogue based, which are more of fears, less of reality as well. Because most of these are bucketed under the bucket of at least efficiency for us, because how we've really resulted in showing a better efficiency. So I think all these is typically the trust package that we offer, depending on what's needed at what level. The bottom line being that yes, do what is right and make sure that you aren't overcommitting and under delivering.
No, thank you, Din. And I think that's a nice kind of, build upon what Shweta shared in terms of, not just access to quality data, representative data, and ensuring you can utilize it, but as well being, specific on what are those use cases. So you don't end up, boiling the ocean and being quite, regimented on what you will and won't do with that data, but as well what data you need for which use cases so you can maximize value and trust. I am conscious, we're heading towards kind of the last 10 minutes, so we might move on to the next question, and we had a few come through as well. One, maybe opening to the floor is, we've been asked, what advice would you give to companies or even individuals who may be looking to transitioning into utilizing more AI, and how can they overcome some of the common challenges that they may be faced? So, from your respective companies, any advice that you've seen in terms of, starting from the early stage of AI adoption, what's helped best accelerate you forward?
I think the AI technology is quite a relatively new agenda in about our healthcare services and solution area. So some best practice sharing is kind of imminent right now, and also there's kind of the global some watch out what's going on in each market, particularly US, Germany, and France, and Korea, and other countries. What's the practice and governance, and also their practice for that? We all know that some kind of the well-known practice in Germany about with the DIGA, how they operating the AI technology, and in the end what value they are embracing right now. I think those kind of the best practice can impact the other country. So even in Korea, we are watching out what happened in the foreign country. targeting the Germany, France, and Belgium, and the US, Japan, and Australia too. So we can share the further for the best cases, and also how they determine the value, and how they some demonstrate eventually cost saving or cost effectiveness in the healthcare setting, because there are a lot of these expectations about AI technology. Eventually, this technology can reduce cost, particularly the high spending country in the US. But Korea is not the case much. The relatively is smaller the spending compared to the other foreign major market. But anyway, there are a lot of these expectations why we introduced AI technology, and what value and what the aspect they contribute to cost saving. But in most cases, it's quite challenging to demonstrate the cost saving for them, because the majority of the AI technology so far, it's got some supplementary technology rather than the replacement technology perspective. So, but eventually, without any the demonstration of the cost saving and cost efficiency, it will be very challenging. So, in that point, the best practice sharing for that the proposed could be useful. And also, I think as the Shweta and Nitin mentioned that the public-private partnership, we need to more pay attention about some payer side, their contributions. The payer has a very unique situation about their role in the healthcare sector. They are the buyer, and also they are the motivator for the evidence generators, and also they are the kind of the promoter for technology innovation for them. When you think about the US cases, you know, even though even there's some opportunity for the technology development under the IDE, the process, the payer Medicare, and also commercial payer for the IDE, the study for that, you know, with some their own the guidance. Anyway, the payers can contribute technology innovations, and also they can select innovation fit for their purpose, and also they can disseminate the value for the technology. So we need more some engagement with a payer perspective and payer their demand. That's my thought.
No, thank you, SS. And I am conscious we've got only another 5 minutes before we bring to close. So thank you all for the robust conversation. And I think, you know, clearly there's a lot still to be done, a lot of jobs to be done come 2025. So I don't think it's going to be any less busy. Before we do kind of hand over to close and I hand back to Sufen, you know, I'd love, whilst we've got the panelists on the line, you know, as we move into 2025, if you had to bet on one action that you would recommend we take forward into 2025 to realize the value of AI, what would that be? You know, what is your one recommendation on the must-do next year for AI translation? So maybe I don't want to pick on anyone, but maybe Nitin, do you have in mind, you know, your one action that you would bet on as a must-do for next year?
Yes, I mean, it will be more external focused, where you go out, educate, work with the regulators, work with the government. I think those are the real shaping sort of activities and efforts that we should look at, because internally we are pretty much in control. Thanks.
No, thank you, Nitin, and thanks for a short and sweet action, very tangible. Maybe moving down my screen, Shweta, you know, we've got shaping activities with regulators and government for 2025. What would you recommend as the top action to help translate AI in MedTech?
I think for me it's the same. You know, I have an extremely externally focused sort of role.
Yeah.
So on the top of my agenda really is twofold: engage with our trade associations, you know, making sure we come up with white papers and industry papers that are very well aligned with what our positions are, and of course collaborate externally with stakeholders, both within the government and otherwise, and make sure that we have harmonized sort of voluntary and flexible risk-based framework. We have in which industry gets a role to play. We have technical standards on AI, which again is a consultative process in which industry has a say. Because I think industry plays a very important role in both evaluating and implementing AI tools. So I think a lot of work to do externally, also with these international forums and these multilateral agencies, which are also kind of like WHO and UN, which are also at the forefront of giving guidance to countries. So I think collaborate and advocate.
Thank you, Shweta, and sounds like building nicely on Nitin's agenda as well. And SS, what would you put forward in terms of the top action you'd recommend the industry takes forward to translate AI in MedTech in Asia Pacific next year?
I think it's the same to the Shweta than Nitin. Probably we need to make effort for the evidence generations and to meet some demand from our stakeholders. Externally, we need to do some kind of collaboration coordinations and particularly develop the value framework, because without value framework, even invest some money for the evidence generation, that could be some kind of useless due to the lack of the value framework. Yeah, that's my thought.
No, thank you. And I think it's interesting because, we definitely heard collaborate from all panelists. So it sounds like that rings true, but for a few different agenda items, really being in front of the regulation and government policy, working with trade associations in terms of elevating the voice and looking at, harmonized risk-based frameworks and technical standards. And then, SS, to your point, looking at collaboration for value frameworks. So it sounds like collaboration's needed, but there are a few different outcomes to push towards. Well, with that, we are just about at time. I'm running to the tight agenda. Thank you, APAC Med, on that. If there are any follow-up questions, I know we received quite a lot in the chat. We are happy to respond to those and the panelists after this. So we'll share through an email, and I believe this is recorded as well for your future reference. Thank you, Shweta, SS, and Nitin, for taking the time and your open sharing. I love the diversity of perspective. And I think to conclude, it sounds like next year, lots of jobs to be done, but collaboration is going to be key. So in the spirit of collaboration, I will kindly hand back to Sufen, and thank you panelists for your time today.
Thank you, Anna, Shweta, SS, and Nitin for your discussion, and also Anna for putting the perspective right up in the first 10 minutes. And I think it's very heartening on behalf of APAC Med that we hear collaboration ringing through in all of the discussions, because as a trade association, I think we exist, one of our functions is really to be able to work with industry and all the other stakeholders in the ecosystem to deliver value or to advocate on some of these topics that are important to all of us. So before we close for today, I would just like to gather all of our speakers together to take a photo, just to have a record of what was discussed today. A nice one, and then we'll put it on our LinkedIn page. So if I can go on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you, everyone, and to all our participants. Thank you for dialing in for the webinar today. We will call today's session to a close. Thank you for your time and have a good week ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.